Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Hello and welcome. I'm Phil McKinney. This week, we are reaching deep into the archive and bringing you one of our most downloaded shows. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio in Northern Colorado for another week's episode of the show. As many of you know, we've been doing this show for quite some time. We just started season 16. So yes, there are 15 years of archive that you can go find. Just hop on over to killerinnovations.com and you can go back and search. And yes, show episode number 1 is still up in the archive. So today's show, we're going to take a little bit of a different. Last couple of shows, we've been focusing on virtual brainstorming. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break this week, and we're going to go with a completely different topic. And the topic that I want to talk about today is really around buzzwords. Now, buzzwords just absolutely drive me crazy. People misuse them. People try to show off how smart they are. And I think they just cause a lot of confusion for people, particularly people who don't deal with whatever the topic of the buzzword is day in and day out. So we're going to hop in and we're going to take a look at buzzwords. And I'm going to give you the list of the ones that drive me bananas. And I'd be interested in hearing which ones are the ones that kind of grate on you. And also, as part of this, I'm going to give you a couple of hints on how to avoid looking like an idiot. There's a lot of people out there that will try to make themselves sound better, particularly those that don't have familiarity with even the topic or the buzzword they're saying. So I'm sure none of you do that, but just want to give everybody fair warning as we go through this. Now, I will also admit, though, that some of these buzzwords you've heard on this show and you've seen in my blog post or you even read in my book. So this isn't calling you out as being something different. We all get caught in the trap of buzzwords. And part of what I'm trying to do today is going to break the habit. So let's not delay. Let's go ahead and get right into talking about buzzwords. Now, what is a buzzword? A buzzword is some important sounding, it's usually a technical term or it's a term specific to an industry or to a job function. So there are technical buzzwords, which I had to weigh in on when I was at HB. There's buzzwords for those people in the mobile industry. There's buzzwords if you're in marketing. There's buzzwords if you're in finance. But the word or the phrase that's used is often has little meaning, and it's used chiefly to impress laymen, like, oh, we have this secret language, and you don't know what that language is, which is all bogus. So buzzwords are this thing that kind of, rather than welcoming people in, it actually pushes people away because they're self-conscious. They don't know what that word means. They don't want to ask what that word means. So what are some buzzwords that are common out there? So here's just a quick example of just general, generic buzzwords that we all come across on a regular basis. So synergy. Oh, we need synergy with the ecosystem. We need stronger synergy with cross-functional teams within our organization. Well, what do we mean by synergy? It means something as simple as just work better together. Well, then why don't we just say that? Another buzzword that kind of gets under my skin is clickbait. It's a term that's kind of used as a negative slam for those that create content, whether that's blog posts or digital versions of newspapers or magazines. It's that title that causes you to click because it leaves you hanging. It doesn't quite tell you enough to know what the story is about, but it's intriguing enough for you to want to click. So it's a way to almost fool you to get into an article. It's clickbait. Growth hacking. This one is gone way overboard, right? So it's how do you hack or how do you uh, almost like break the rules to drive growth within an organization. Why don't we just say increase growth or, exponentially grow your organization? Why do we have to use the term growth hacking? The other is close the loop, right? So let's close the loop. Let's make sure everybody's got all the information rather than just saying talk to everybody. We have to say close the loop. The other is let's circle back. Let's circle back next week on this, which means we're just going to talk about this topic in next week's meeting versus getting to a decision today. So let's circle back versus let's talk next week. Or ping me offline. There's some question or topic or someone is getting aggravated and you want to get it offline. You want to talk about it in person. We say ping me offline. Well, what does it we really mean? Well, when we say ping me offline, it's just, hey, call me. We'll talk about it. Let's you and I get together over coffee. We can discuss this. So the buzzwords are, in some cases, almost these artificial, barriers that are put up in front of actually being able to be transparent and simplify our language and making it easier for everybody to understand what it is we mean versus doing this kind of, charade, I guess, where people have to guess, what is it? What does he mean by that term? I'm not quite sure. I'm going to guess because I want to look stupid, right? Why don't we just simplify our language? It would make all of our lives much easier. And for some people, buzzwords are just one of those things that's like fingernails on a chalkboard that just drive people absolutely crazy every time they hear it, right? And in fact, recently, 7 weeks or 8 weeks ago, there was this buzzword bingo card that was going around that was all about buzzwords related to video conferencing. So think Zoom, WebEx, Skype for business, whichever tool you and your organization choose to use, there was this buzzword bingo card. And that way people would then check off all the buzzwords. And then if you got bingo, you could yell bingo in the meeting. So buzzwords in this case would be like, can you hear me now? Please mute if you're not talking. Who's got the baby in the background? All of the buzzwords are common terms that we tend to repeat when we're on the video conferencing calls, or common terms that we constantly use. So buzzwords are one of those things that just drive people crazy. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret here. Innovation is no different than any other industry or any other job function, whether it be marketing, finance, technology, where they all have buzzwords. Guess what? We in the innovation game, we have buzzwords. And these buzzwords will drive people crazy just as much as any other. Now, number one on my list for innovation buzzwords is design thinking. Now, design thinking is a term that's been around for quite some time, but it drives people crazy. And in fact, it is a term hated by actual designers. Now, the original intent was to really define a process where the end user, the needs of your user, were conceived from the very start of the project all the way through. It wasn't like, let's get the features and functions right, and then we'll make it easy for the user. Or we'll get the feature and functions right and meet the unspoken needs of a user. We'll get the features right and we'll do X. No. Bring the user forward, put him in front, and then focus on designing the entire experience for that customer from the time they sign up to the time they're using your product to the point where they end of life your product. How do you put the user in a central position? Now, instead of it being that, it's turned into this people feeling good simply because we hold a session and we put a bunch of stickies up on a flip chart or up on a wall in a conference room. Now, is that really design thinking, or is it just making us feel good, right? So design thinking, kind of as a generic term, is turned into a buzzword. And when buzzwords get that kind of traction, they will tend to lose their meaning. People don't really remember what was the original intent of design thinking as a concept and as a design thinking as a process. You can go take executive training courses at leading universities around the world on design thinking, and each of them will have a different definition and a different understanding of how do you bring that forward and how do you really make that useful on the project that you have. And like I said before, this is a term that's absolutely hated by actual designers, because everybody then sounds like they understand design, when in reality, design is a lot harder than it looks. The next buzzword I want to talk about is ideation. Now, ideation is a term I use a lot. And in fact, we have workshops that we teach called disruptive ideation. But what does the word ideation really mean? It's basically a process where innovators generate ideas. Now, people outside of the innovation industry can be highly annoyed by it. And I've learned this from people raising the issue of my use of the word ideation. Face it, it's a made-up word. It doesn't mean anything. So why don't we just say brainstorming? Do we hold an ideation workshop or do we hold a brainstorming workshop? What's the difference? What is the difference between an ideation workshop and a brainstorming workshop? Well, good question, right? And I'm not quite sure I could even explain it to you, or if there really is even something that is different. I think in some cases, some organizations and some innovation consultants conceived of the word ideation just as a way to make something sound like it's different. But the output of an ideation effort is what? Ideas. The output of a brainstorming effort is what? Ideas. Now, you could argue that brainstorming, you could think of that as a buzzword. Now, that's been around for quite some time, right? But ideation is kind of a new term. And in some cases, you could argue that people started using the word ideation because all of the website URLs and all of the SEO for brainstorming was too hard to get listed. So everybody switched to a new term in order to be able to go make it easy to be found and be able to find new clients. And, it's the result of some innovation consultants trying to put a new kind of a spin on the same thing that we've always done, which is bring people together and facilitate an environment that encourages, supports, and rewards the ability of teams to generate the best ideas that lead to the best products. Okay, so it's really that simple, but we make it much harder with terms like ideation. Now, this next term is one that, again, I use a lot. I will be the first one to confess, but it's a one that does drive some people crazy, and that is this term disruptor. Now, the term describes someone or something that's kind of rocking the boat. Game changers who, basically throw sand in the gears of an industry, of companies that already exist. And they come at a problem with a very unique and different way. The problem is the term gets applied to everybody. Now, here's the real challenge, right? We all think of disruptors as being kind of those people who are kind of, the ones that are pushing and shoving and all of that. But it can be pretty off-putting if you refer to yourself as a disruptor. So think about it. What does your LinkedIn profile say? Is the word disruptor in your LinkedIn profile? Then it's probably annoying some people, right? Now, it's different if somebody else calls you a disruptor, right? Your boss, you get an article in some publication, there's a blog post written about you, you make an appearance on a podcast, and the host calls you a disruptor. That's different. If you call yourself a disruptor, not a good use of that term. And that even drives people who hate buzzwords even crazier. Now, A disruptor by nature, there's nothing wrong with that, right? A disruptor is that person who develops innovations that come at a problem in a unique and different way, in such a way that it disrupts something. It causes something to change. That industry can't stay on its current course because of a disruptor. An example would be is Uber is a disruptor to the ride-hailing services, be it taxis or whatever, right? It used to be you'd go to the airport, you stand in your taxi line, you get into the taxi, and off you'd go to your destination versus, and then when you get to the destination, get your credit card out and swipe, and the card reader can't read your credit card. I can't tell you how many times that happened to me, in my travel. Uber disrupted the taxi industry. It created an entirely new industry, both Uber and Lyft. And as a result, then the founders of Uber and Lyft get identified as being disruptors. But other people call them disruptors. They never called themselves disruptors, or at least I hope they didn't call themselves disruptors. Now, along these lines of disruptors, the next buzzword, some of you in the innovation game may argue with me on this one, saying it's not a buzzword, and that is innovators. Now, this is a highly overused word. You have to admit that. And this is basically someone who introduces a new product, a new services, or a new strategy that is some kind of revolutionary. People look at it and go, wow, that's different. Wow, that's unique. Now, the challenge is everyone and their mother is an innovator these days, right? The term gets applied to anybody and everybody. There's no bar, right? Now, people try to use it as a descriptor for what it is they do as a capability. Oh, I'm a designer. Oh, I'm a whatever. Some people have latched on to describing themselves as innovators in an attempt to try to differentiate themselves from just not being just something else, just something of a common term that everybody has. The problem is everybody's hopping on that bandwagon, and everybody is using the term innovator. And as a result, its meaning is becoming less and less differentiated. And in fact, it gets hard to describe what is an innovator. It's actually probably easier to just say who is not an innovator, who is not somebody who's working on developing a new product, a new service, a new strategy, a new company that people think is revolutionary, right? It could be everything from somebody's Etsy store generating some unique thing that people, really like, and therefore, wow, that person's an innovator. They're innovating something that's really unique and different, but it's not maybe the super wow, but maybe it's it's innovative, it's revolutionary, it's something that nobody else thought of. They're an innovator, right? So I think part of the challenge of this term is some of you will argue it's not a buzzword. I would say it is a buzzword, and I measure that basically on its overuse and how does it get repeated over and over and over again, and so its meaning starts to get lost. So that's my consideration of what constitutes a buzzword in this case. The next buzzword I want to talk about is system thinking. Now, some of you may have heard this, some of you may have not. If you are not using one of the big six, what we used to call the big six consulting houses that are all out there trying to push their innovation thinking, what they're talking about or what they try to do is an attempt to try to differentiate themselves. There's this term running around now in the innovation space called systems thinking. And basically that their position is that they're taking a unique look at innovation as a complex system rather than a process, right? Now, I came from Computer Sciences Corporation. I used to be part of one of the big consulting houses. I ran the telecom consulting practice worldwide. So this was, 1992 to 96, 91 to 96, end of 96. And look, when I was there, if you're not familiar with the term business process reengineering, BPR, that's a term that was coined by Champy, who used to run the consulting, the high-end consulting practice at COC for many years, James Champy. So if you've read the business process reengineering book, that's all part of the same organization and team. So I understand what these big consulting houses are trying to do. You know, you're trying to differentiate yourself, trying to get attention to you to try to win business, right? So they're using this term called systems thinking, which is a buzzword that comes from across a wide range of industries when you look at complex things as systems rather than just a defined, well-understood process. Now, the problem is this concept is so vague that few, if anyone, understands what it means or, quite honestly, achieves it. Right? They're trying to make something sound more complex than what it is, and they're using a buzzword that's used in other industries and bringing it in to the innovation space. So systems thinking, flat out, a buzzword that sounds complex, sounds hard, sounds interesting, sounds, wow, that's a different view. I hear everything about process or innovation frameworks, and everybody talks about it that way. I've never heard anybody talk about innovation as a systems process, as a systems approach rather than a process approach, right? So people get interested in the new shiny object. Systems thinking is the new shiny object when it comes to the innovation space, and that's the problem, right? People don't want to ask the question. A chief innovation officer does not want to ask, what does that really mean? And how's that really going to manifest itself? And how is that going to make my business or process better? Nobody wants to look stupid, so everybody even avoids ever asking the question about it, and it shows. I've seen so many organizations, large organizations, that get swept up into these kinds of discussions, and then they spend millions of dollars looking at and creating and setting up their approach to innovation with the help of some of these consultants. The consultant goes away, and when they get done, there's nothing there. They talked about a systems approach, but they didn't help the organization achieve it. Basically, it's a process with some pretty ribbons hanging off of it. So, buzzword, and a buzzword in particular to be very careful of. The next one is pain points. Now, I have to admit, I use this term a fair amount, so this is one of those things I have to catch myself on, right? Basically, the term is used in the context of talking about, answering customers' pain points, the things that just drive customers crazy. But isn't it just easier, more to the point, to say, we want to solve our customers' problems? Do we have to use the term pain point? Innovation is about solving our customers or our users' problems. That's it. Nice and simple. Everybody understands what that means. Versus a pain point. Well, does this constitute a pain point? It's not really a pain point. How big of a pain point does it have to be a pain before it becomes a pain point? Right? So you can get yourself chasing your tail all over this, right? So pain points is another one of those buzzwords that can, again, be highly annoying to people as to what is it you really mean, right? We want to solve our customers' problems. That's what a pain point is. Then just say it. Say what you mean versus trying to use yet another set of buzzwords. Look, I'm speaking to myself. This is one that I use, and I use it a fair amount when I'm doing public speaking. And the process of putting today's show, I basically had to recognize, and even some of the challenges of myself, where we're using terms because there's terms that's always been used, and it's a term we use in the innovation space. And part of my mission or my goal this year is to get rid of as much of the barriers or the friction that kind of creates an us and them condition between those that are in the innovation space and those that are not in the innovation space, or those that don't see them as being part of any kind of innovation effort, right? So I want to reduce that barrier, get rid of the buzzwords, and talk in plain and simple language. Pain point, great starting point in that case. Another buzzword is social innovation. Now, I've actually been an advisor for organizations that focus on social innovation, such as the Unreasonable Institute in Boulder and a number of others around the world. Now, the term, it's been used and its definition has been misused and redefined to the point where it's somewhat meaningless now. What does social innovation mean? Here's what I would propose. I would propose that it be used only for innovation to an intractable social problem. An intractable social problem. So that social problem could be, innovating to eliminate polio on a worldwide basis. Social innovation. Hunger. Clean water. Right? It's not, you can't call something social innovation when what was done was you installed a piano on a public space. Now, that's a real example. I've seen people claim to design and develop social innovation, and the result was putting a piano in a walkway in a downtown area. Okay? What social problem? What was the social problem? What was the intractable, really hard, really big social problem you're going on for that? What was it? How are you going to make that work? Now, look, there's a lot of major social challenges we have in front of us, right? And the way I think about it is kind of a secondary meaning behind social innovation is from the perspective of an investor. Now, I do a little bit, not nearly as much as I used to, but I used to do a little bit of angel investing. I would invest in entrepreneurs. Today, for my wife and I and our small little family venture fund called Tech Trend, that our investments are primarily focused in developing countries. Our biggest investment being in Rwanda in Lakeside Fish Farm. And you can go search for Lakeside Fish Farm Rwanda and you can read all about the work that we have going on there, right? But in the case of social innovation, in the case of like Rwanda, my investment is not in the traditional P&L perspective. When someone comes to me and says, I'm doing social innovation, I think of myself as what we call an impact investor. I'm not looking for a return. The result of this investment is not going to change my retirement, right? I invest in social programs. In the case of Lakeside, yes, I'm creating jobs, but it's about creating an economy in the Bugesera region of Rwanda, one of the poorest regions of Rwanda, and therefore create jobs, create an industry in the form of fish farming, right? And I've told the CEO and the investors, and my wife and I are the lead investors. Technically, I'm the non-executive chair, right? That I will not touch my money for 35 years, right? So any outcome of that is going to have zero impact on my retirement. That's not the motivation. When I think about social innovation and having these big kinds of solving these big problems, we need a different investment model. And then when you say social innovation, I think impact investor, that is a great partnership, but the return and the approach to that innovation has to be completely different. The next buzzword I want to talk about is one called I'm a thought leader. Now, this is a term that, again, gets a little bit overused. Now, it should be the goal of any or most, if not all, aspiring innovation leaders. Your role is to be a thought leader. There's nothing wrong with that concept of being a thought leader. But just like the term disruptor, this term becomes cringeworthy if you refer to yourself as a thought leader, right? So the question being is what does your LinkedIn profile say? Do you call yourself a thought leader, or do others call you a thought leader? Now, thought leading, like I said, by itself is a goal everybody should have, particularly if you are in the innovation space, right? Nobody wants a me too kind of cool best practices kind of innovation leader, right? Best practice means you just basically steal the best practices from everybody else, right? For your organizations, you need to adapt however you're doing your innovation and then get it adopted broadly within your organization. So adapt and adopt. That's key. And if you do that, yes, you're taking the best practices and thoughts of others, but you've got to add your own thought leadership to how best for your organization to take advantage of that and to be highly successful. So, thought leader, term I don't have heartburn over. Just don't call yourself a thought leader. If somebody else calls you a thought leader, then refer the heck out of it, right? If the New York Times calls so-and-so a thought leader, that's fair game, okay? So thought leader, that's one that I think, again, it's a good term. Just don't call yourself a thought leader. And then idea management software. This is a term that's come up, I don't know, probably in the last decade, maybe. Yeah, probably about right? Idea management software, or IMS, right? You know, back when I was first starting the innovation program office in 2007, I'm guessing, 6. We needed some way to manage ideas. Idea management systems did not exist. And we chose a vendor. That particular vendor is actually the same vendor I'm using today at my second job as a CEO, right? Now, there's a lot of IMS systems out there now. It's kind of become the buzzword. Enterprises are buying. Oh, we need an idea management system, right? Now, an IMS is really, its sole purpose is to capture and track ideas. You can do it for a team or you can do it for an organization. The misuse of the term comes from people describing a spreadsheet as their IMS, right? There's a certain capability, and everybody now is labeling everything as an idea management system or as idea management software, right? But an Excel spreadsheet, not really an idea management system. Now, in the early days of your innovation efforts, using an Excel spreadsheet is perfectly fine. We started that way at HP because there was no idea management software systems back then. They didn't exist. And in fact, we worked with this company. We gave them our requirements. They turned it into a product, and now they've gone on to be quite successful in selling their idea management system all over the place. And that's great. No harm, no foul. That was the understanding. We didn't want to build it. We found a company to build what we needed, and we perfectly blessed them to take what input and feature requests that we've got and sell it to customers. And now they're a well-established software business. The second company I'm at that I'm using the exact same tool set, they are being extremely helpful and responsive to. And it's a tool that they have found that can be broadly used by a large number of customers, and they've been quite successful. So an idea management system has a certain meaning. Calling something an IMS just because it's the buzzword of innovation and everybody wants to have an IMS, but maybe your innovation effort is too small, and calling an Excel spreadsheet an idea management system, not quite accurate, and it's a misuse of the term. And that's where buzzwords become a challenge. An idea tracking system using Excel, perfectly legit. And if you're small, that's what you should start out with before you start writing big checks to have an idea management system put in place. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. Want to make sure that you have all the ways to get in contact with me. You can email me over at phil@killinnovations.com, the blog, where I write columns and comments on a more broad and generic sense, is over at philmckinney.com. The show notes with everything we've talked about today, you can find them over at killinnovations.com. And if you're interested in my book and understanding how it could potentially be helpful for you, you can hop on over to beyondtheobvious.com. And a little secret here is over at beyondtheobvious.com, the blog post, if you read all of the blog posts that are posted over there at Beyond the Obvious, you actually get everything that's in the book, because every word that's in the book appears in Beyond the Obvious over a whole series of posts. So with that, one other thing, if you would like to keep updated on everything I'm working on and the show and etc., 2 ways you can get updated. You can text the word innovation to 44222. So again, the word innovation to 44222, or you can send an email to innovation@killerinnovations.com. That's innovation@killerinnovations.com. The text of the innovation, that works in the United States. The email works worldwide. It'll add you onto the contact list. You'll get updated on my upcoming webinars, or where I'm just going to host and ask me anything or something like that. So if you want to stay updated, text innovation to 44222 or innovation@killerinnovations.com. Either way gets you updated. And with that, I'm going to thank you for spending the time this week with us. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.